Hi, welcome to the Troy and Steve show. I'm not Troy, I'm Steve. Even though those of you that are in Zoom are seeing me as Troy, I'm actually not Troy. Troy's out on the road. He's on vacation right now. So I'm going to kind of be handling everything from the chat to admitting people to getting our guest started and making sure that everything records okay. So I appreciate everybody coming in. Couple things just to let you know about those of you that are with IEPPV. Keep in mind that we do this each and every first Wednesday of the month, all the way through the end of the year. We've got great guests lined up all the way through the end of the year. And then those of you that are coming in from our sister groups, Orange County, San Diego, wherever you're coming from, welcome. I hope that you enjoy this. You are invited to come and join, obviously, each and every show that we do here for doing this. Each month, we're bringing you a different photographer with a different genre of photography to try and share with you some of the tips and tricks that they use, the story of their career, and just basically inspiration for whatever it is that you're shooting. And today's guest is no exception to that. First of all, I have had David on my podcast, Behind the Shot, before. We discussed the shot that he did for Lexus, but I want you to understand a couple things about David. David started at 15 years old. He was a working pro. He wanted to shoot cars and motorcycles. So he convinced, and actually nobody's seeing me now that I think about it, so I should probably, so that everybody can see me, let me just switch this really quick here. Now, you know what, I'm gonna leave it because I've got a second recording going, so I'm just gonna leave it like it is. David wanted to shoot, knew that he wanted to shoot motorcycles and cars. So he convinced, I don't even know how you do this, he convinced a newspaper owner to start a national weekly newspaper about off-road motorcycling. And that's kind of where I know David from, is his legendary off-road stuff. The in my life and at my age, the heyday of motocross, he shot them all. He was at Cycle Guide magazine. His clients include Car and Driver, Cycle World, Cycle. He's had Toyota, Lexus, BMW, Yamaha, Honda. He's working with Hyundai right now. He has done stuff. For example, he had a shot that he wanted to do once where he had to build his own 3-axis gyro to be able to do car-to-car shots. And he built a 20-foot geodesic arm that mounted on the front of a car to be able to actually get a camera mounted on the front of the car. He's an absolute legend. So to everybody, if you would please welcome my friend David Dewhurst. David, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Steve. Thank you. I don't know how the hell I'm going to live up to that intro, but I'll give it a
Well,
shot.
and I was going to say to you, I've read your bio a million times. There's a ton of stuff I left out. So
Yeah,
there's
well,
that.
I've been doing it a while. So yeah, as you said, I did actually start when I was 15. I was just telling my son this morning a story. I actually worked in a darkroom for a photographer they did all kinds of industrial stuff, and they had a contract with a local harbor area port, and they used to do pictures of cranes and ships and God knows what, anything that happened in the port. Until one day, a Russian sailor fell off a boat, drowned, and nobody knew he was there for 2 days. And on my second day at the job, I had to do 8x10 glosses of a floating dead Russian sailor in the harbor, which was that was my introduction to professional photography, which was kind of weird. It's not got much better since then, but anyway.
Oh, it's gotten better. It's
Well,
gotten
yeah,
definitely better, my friend.
it's got weirder since then, but anyway.
So you're actually traveling right now. You're in a hotel room. You're on a job for Hyundai, right?
Correct. Yeah, we're up here doing the press launch for the Hyundai Santa Cruz, a new little compact pickup truck. So we're here for a week shooting around all around the area. Journalists come from all over the country, and this is what I do quite a lot of these days: is stuff at PR departments at car companies, and we shoot the car itself prior to the event. We do all the PR photography that goes out that you'll see in newspapers, magazines, and things like that. And then we come and do these events where we shoot journalists with the cars, shoot them in the locations, and then we shoot a lot of stuff in this specific location up and down the coast up in Northern California, so that when they write about the stories, they can they can write about driving the car locally. So that we do a lot of that too. So yeah, they're just big chrome balls. Car photography is a weird business. It's not like anything else, unless maybe shooting glass bottles and things like that. Um, Cars are tough because literally they are just giant big chrome balls that reflect everything. So it takes a special kind of understanding to really capture cars properly. So um, we'll go through some of the things. I'll give you some examples of what I do, what I've done over the years, and you'll get a sense of this. So this is just a grab shot. This shows you what cars look like when you're not being careful. Big giant reflections everywhere, big shadows. They just look ugly. In bright sunshine, cars rarely look good. This was a shot I just took the other day right up here while I was doing a test for some other stuff. And you can see this was another thing for again, you can see all the specular highlights, all the horrible shadows. Car looks terrible. So you can't just shoot cars in the middle of the day and watch ads on TV, watch magazines, and you'll see that most of them are not shot in the middle of the day. This is the kind of thing that you'll see. There are a bunch of different ways you can do it. This is open shadow, open shade, just shooting the car with no direct sun on it. Always looks better this way, unless some weird art director thinks he wants all kinds of funky lighting. So this is pretty typical of a lot of stuff you'll see in car photography, open shade. Another way to do it is to take the car on location and then light the car on location. Used to be back in the day, we'd do things like this with a giant softbox, a 50-foot softbox, 50 by 15 feet softbox with huge amounts of strobe power up in the box. This was not done like that, and I'll get to some other things later on to show you how. This was all done with a single flash head, just moving around. This is another example of doing it with a flash, but this is almost all available light. The only flash here is filling in the front of the car, just lighting up a bit of the greenery in the foreground just to give it some weird different look. So this is a combination of available light and artificial light. The other way is just to get up damned early in the morning and just do God's best sunrise with this is up at Alabama Hills on the way up to Mammoth, Lexus shoot we did. But again, it's very rare that you'll see a car shot in the middle of the day, and if it is, it's often shot with a giant scrim in front of it or something to kill all the highlights and make the car look good. So here we got another one. This is a combination shot. This is all of the above. It's sunrise, it's actually sunset, some natural shade on the car, and it's also some artificial light on the side of the car. This is out in Paris. It's the place called Western Science Center over in Hammett. Sorry, not Paris, Hammett. Great location. And here's the same location again. And interesting, a lot of what we do these days, it didn't used to be the case, but these days everybody's got tight budgets, so everybody expects the photographer to shoot video too. So this is actually a combined still and video shoot for this Lexus GS. So all this is done not with strobe. This is actually done with HMI lights lighting up the wall of the building, the rear of the car, and then again, using available light for most of the car itself. So again, you're kind of combining a lot of different elements. The other thing that we has become hugely important these days is a shot like this where giant amounts of exposure stacking. This is an exposure we did for the sky, an exposure for the building, and then an exposure for the dark blue car. And this all combined, there are probably about 12 different exposures, different frames here, all stacked together to make this thing. Car photography has become a huge Photoshop focus stacking, exposure stacking business, which is in many ways made life easier, because back in the day when I started doing this stuff, we were shooting 8x10 sheets of film, and you had to try and do the whole thing in one shoot. That was pretty damn difficult. Nowadays, it's become a lot easier. A lot more people can do car photography well, just because you can learn about it on the internet and do it all in Photoshop. So here we got another Lexus. This was a prototype of the Lexus GS. And it was one of the things about shooting cars is everybody these days wants some contemporary building as a background. So the hard part about cars is it's not some skinny model or a bottle or whatever it is you're shooting. It's some 15-foot long, 3-ton piece of metal that you got to put in front of a building. It's really hard to find locations where you can actually get the car in there. So making it even worse here was this car was top secret. In the business, they call it code red. It's a code red car where they can't let anybody see it because this is way ahead of production. So we had to find a secret location where you can actually get the car into position. The hardest part about car photography, for me at least, is locations, finding locations. So this one actually is in Rancho Cucamonga. It's the Water District building over in Rancho Cucamonga. And it was all secured. We actually hire security people to come in, make sure nobody gets in there, no photography, no people with cameras. It becomes a giant pain in the butt. The car is always covered with a black sheet so that nobody can see it. Last minute, pull the sheet off, shoot a picture of the car. So things like this, especially with secret cars, very, very, very difficult. Sometimes, though, you get something like this where...
David, I have a quick question for you on that last slide.
Yes.
So you have a code red car.
Yes.
That's a government building. There's people that work there.
Yeah.
You unveil it.
Yeah.
You then, I'm assuming, cover it up very quick. But what are the odds that there's somebody in that building, or do you make some arrangement to have the building empty?
This is also in the middle of summer, and I think this is like 5:30 in the morning. So there is nobody in the building. Remember, it's sunrise, sunset. Car photographers get up at 2 a.m. Sleep during the middle of the day, and then get up again at 4 o'clock, ready for sunset. That's kind of how we are. And so no, this was very early in the morning. We made sure that nobody was going to be there. We actually put up some blinds to stop people seeing it from the street, just in case. But that's the huge issue.
Okay.
The secrecy.
And so that your picture-in-picture is not on.
Okay, I don't need to be in here. It's the car that matters right now.
There you go.
So this is the exact opposite of what we just saw. This was an existing vehicle, a Lexus RX or NX, I think. We were up in Seattle doing this press event. Some shoots, it's a relatively big budget. There's time to go and find locations and have a scout go out and look for locations. Somebody looks at those, says, yeah, that's the one we want to use, and you go and shoot it. Other events, and this was another press event where it was a press launch, we go in 2 days before the event starts. Sometimes we've been to the place before, sometimes we've not. And we're just dropped in the location and they go, yeah, go and shoot us 50 pictures of this car. We need, 50 different images. So we're just rushing around like crazy trying to find places. So this is outside Seattle, close to Boeing Field, and we were just driving around. We'd actually just had some food and we were driving away from the restaurant and we saw this bridge arrangement overhead and thought, God, that looks so, the shapes are all cool. But what you don't see here is in the original frame, everything below the hood level of the car is chain link fence, homeless people, and green, overgrown green junk everywhere. So we shot the picture, and then everything below the hood line of the car is just got photoshopped out all junk in the image, threw in a background image of Los Angeles. I think it's an LA skyline that we dropped into the holes in the background and basically created something out of a pretty bad situation. So a lot of what we do is literally shooting from the hip. We kind of go in and just have to do a lot of different photography in a short space of time, and sometimes not knowing where the hell we're going to be. So that's another big challenge for the kind of stuff that I do. If it's not high-end advertising stuff.
So let me ask you a question. Jump back to that code red again.
Yes.
Stephen asked, how was that lit?
That is mainly available light. But we were shooting video for this at the same time. There's a video camera over my shoulder. There's an HMI lighting the rear panel where between the tail lights. And there's another HMI from high, an oblique angle, almost running down the side of the car, just to add a little bit of a highlight, because it wasn't a great sunrise. In fact, you can see in the top left corner of the frame reflected in the windows there was some cloud. So
right.
This wasn't a great sunrise. So we had to augment it a little bit.
And actually, Stephen also said, if you go to that next shot with the bridge, Stephen also said, and this is a key distinction, he said in an image competition, judges would pick that bright sun out as something that draws your eye away from the subject. But the key is image competition is not real world commercial necessarily.
No, and this was at the time, again, it depends on who you're shooting pictures for. At the time, the PR person that worked at Lexus was all into light. They
right.
were always crazy about light. They wanted streaks of light, all kinds of stuff. So this is all fake. The light is fake in Photoshop. But that was something that they always kept going on about. So for a period there, we were doing a lot of fake suns and fake streaks and whatever.
And it's whatever the client wants.
It's whatever the client wants. And sometimes the client wants really weird stuff. But yeah. So this next image kind of goes to another thing that is very client-based. This is a Hyundai Sonata. It's a high $20,000, $30,000 car, mid-range kind of car. But they all want the car to be in a location that's at least one income bracket above the potential buyer of the car. So this is a multi-million-dollar home outside Phoenix, up on a hill overlooking the town. But the guy that buys this car probably would not be able to afford that house. But you do find that that's the kind of thing they're looking for. The other thing they're looking for is contemporary. Everybody wants contemporary homes. Nobody wants anything boring. Very hard, especially in California. It's amazing how hard it is to find this kind of a location where it's modern, interesting but simple looking home. This is in Phoenix, and this ironically was in another event we did for Hyundai for the launch of this car. And this is about 100 yards from the hotel where the event was being run. So we were lucky to find this location. But again, it's all about location, location, location. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these jobs that we do these days for launch events are we're giving them stuff to illustrate stories that the journalists are going to write about driving, in this case in Phoenix. So we're always looking for stuff that really shows the area. This is up on the South Mountain above Phoenix, looking down over the city. Again, this is all lit with strobe. I'll show you some of the stuff that we do here in a minute later on, but this is a single strobe, open face strobe on a pole, just walking around the car. And this is probably 15 different frames all stacked on top of each other here to make this one image. So the only original part of the natural part of the shot is the background of the lights and maybe the top of the roof of the car. I don't know, I can't remember this, but a lot of different focus stacking and exposure stacking going on here.
Let me ask you a question. Would you have shot a plate of that background before they pulled the car into position and then pulled the car in? That way you had a clean background behind the car to work with?
We do sometimes, but Steve, the thing with what we do at the PR level, when we're doing all this PR stuff, is we're doing so much photography in a day. I can shoot over 1,000 frames a day, just trying to get something, anything. So we're so short on time that we often, it's like, no, just throw the car in there, bang it in there, let's just shoot it. And we're literally just shooting from the hip. So yeah, it would be nice sometimes to have a little more time to think about some of this stuff, but often it just doesn't happen that way. This was a fun shoot. This was in Hawaii, on the Big Island. Again, Lexus shoot. And they wanted stuff that they kept talking about, they wanted it moody, they wanted it to say something that's different to the normal car stuff. They didn't just want spinning wheels and whatever, sweeping roads. So we were trying to introduce all these tree elements and different stuff. Again, this is actually at the harbor on the Big Island, and if you go 5 degrees left and 5 degrees to the right, there are oil tanks and there's just all kinds of junk. But we managed to squeeze in and find this little hole in the middle that we did at sunset, lit the car from the side, again with some open strobe. And pretty straightforward shot, but the client was really happy with this. And there's a whole series of these here. This is another one up on the hill. This is all, with one exception, this is all natural available light. I've been to this location many times in the past. I've shot here a lot over the years, and it's a place up on the hill where at sunset there's always this weird cloud effect starts happening, and if you're really lucky, you get the sun coming under the cloud, just lights the side of the car. So the only thing we added here was a single strobe in the front, just to kind of hit the light up all this black area in the front of the car. But other than that, this is almost straight out of the camera and almost totally as it was through the eye. So this was a great example of just everything coming together perfectly. 5 minutes later, less than that, 5 minutes later, it actually rained on us right here. So we were lucky, but again, this day was probably the busiest day in my shooting career, and we just shot thousands of images trying to get whatever we were looking for. A lot of action, a lot of location stuff, driving all over the place, and just by a miracle, we got this almost perfect sunset. So it was a cool day. It was also cool because we got to meet this young lady who was a former Miss South America, who was she's now a journalist, a car journalist in I think Brazil or somewhere. But anyway, she was along at the event, and she just wanted a bunch of pictures of herself with the car doing all this kind of stuff. So some days turn out better than others, and she was really cool, nice looking young lady. Some days though, you get the guys aren't quite as good looking. This was this was a shoot for Tesla. This was the very first prototype Tesla Model S, and I was friends with Franz von Holzhausen, who's the designer at Tesla, and he used to work at Mazda when I was doing stuff for Mazda. So they hired me to come and do this thing in New York, and they wanted to include all the architecture, but Franz wanted all these people. He wanted people involved in the image. So we had a whole series of different people behind the cars interacting. These three guys were literally, this was what they were doing. This is not staged. They were just posing. They weren't posing, they were just looking at the car. There's another frame with two other guys later on at the back of the car, kind of doing the same thing. Everybody was just fascinated by it. But this again was a simple shot. Very, there's no lighting. It's all available light. But this took about a week of location scouting and permitting through the city of New York just to be able to put this car in this location. And again, it's location. It's like buying a house. It's location, 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 and that is probably the hardest single part of this whole business, is just getting the car into this particular spot. And it's the photography sometimes is the easiest part of the job. Here's another example of a car sitting in a location at least 2 pay grades above its status here. This is a Lexus CH250, which was a giant flop for the company, an early hybrid 4-door. But they were trying to position this thing as an upmarket vehicle, and this was at a hotel, the Pelican Hill Resort in Orange County, and they just wanted all the elements to make it look classier than it really is. And again, finding the location is the secret. And this one was successful photographically. Unfortunately, it didn't help sell enough cars, and this thing went under. So it's we can't always save the car. Back in Hawaii, this was a Toyota event after the Lexus event we did. This is maybe 10 feet from the shot we did of the Lexus sunset in the harbor area. And this thing, we'd been rushing around doing all kinds of stuff. And we got to this location, and you can see from the sky, which is pretty much exactly how it is. There's not much Photoshop going on here. It was just the darkest sky on earth, and the sun just popped out all of a sudden, and it started to pour down with rain. But we rushed into this location. We had no clue where we were going. It was just like, well, quick, the sun's coming out. Threw the car up against the ocean here, added a strobe from the front just to kind of fill it in a little bit. And literally 30 seconds after this, we were wet through because it was just pouring with rain. So it's chasing daylight, chasing weather is, an occupational hazard with photography of cars. Sometimes, though, the weather works for you. This was again the end of another long day on that Toyota Camry shoot that we did over on the Big Island. A lot of strobe, obviously, in this one. We had to light it because there's a big bank of trees off to the left here. The reflections in the car look terrible. So the only way to overcome that was to kind of throw in a bunch of light and make it look as smooth and clean as we could. This shot got a lot of use in magazines and stuff over the years. So this one made everybody pretty happy, which was kind of cool. Another one that got a lot of coverage. This was again the Lexus NX up in Seattle, and this is actually a boat launch ramp across from downtown Seattle, and we were going to do this just as a straight sunset shot. We had it all planned. This was one of those rare occasions where we thought we knew everything was going to be perfect and we knew what we were going to do. But as always happens, it all fell apart at the last minute. So no sunset. It just went. You can just see a bit of sun in the buildings in the background. But the car was the sun here in the foreground just went away totally. So we rushed around and fired some strobe in the side of the car and managed to kind of save the day here. But this was, again, one of those times when you think you've got it all under control and you think you know what's going to happen, but Mother Nature kind of turns it all on its head. It's also interesting here to note that one of the things, especially if you have the designer of the car, it's horrible if you have the designer of the vehicle along on the photo shoot, because when he gets there, he's going to start looking at all these hard edge shapes in the bottom of the vehicle, just above the sill here, and all the shapes above the rear wheel and stuff. All the designers want to see every one of those creases and folds just enhanced as much as possible. Sometimes they hate what they produce and they want to hide those creases, but most of the time they want to just exaggerate all the creases, all the folds, make every line stand out. So you'll notice a lot of what I do has a lot of, almost overlit stuff going on the side of the car. That's something I've learned to do, having dealt with so many designers who just want to show off all the lines. So sometimes you're trying to enhance what the car has to offer. Sometimes you're trying to hide it. We once did a thing in a studio where the designer hated the way his car looked. He was just so unhappy with the way it turned out. And the whole time we were in the studio lighting this thing, he kept saying, no, we've got to kind of hide that. Don't want to show it. It's too deep here. And we spent a whole day just trying to make this guy happy and make his car look better than he thought it was. I thought it looked cool, but anyway.
So I have to ask, you just opened the door.
Yeah.
Are you willing to say what car that was?
It was a Toyota that never saw the light of day. It was a prototype. It was a concept vehicle. It was a concept sports car that never happened. It was at the time, it was a really secret thing that they thought they were going to produce. Never happened. And the designer just was so unhappy with everything about the car. And he, as I say, we spent forever just trying to make him happy. But all to nothing because the car never saw the light of day. So moving along again, it's a kind of a cliche picture. Everybody shot a picture of the Golden Gate Bridge with the car in front of it. This was Lexus, but again, it's a cliche. But we're doing a job for a client where we're trying to give the journalists who are along on the event something that they can talk about in relation not just to the car but to the location that they're driving the car. So we end up with a lot of these kinds of things. This particular shot was just roll the car in. This I think is total daylight. There's no lighting other than daylight on this car as the cloud builds up over the Marin here, and you get this weird soft light on the car, which is kind of cool. We've done shots on, you can see just above the car, to the rear of the car, there's a pier there, which actually makes a kind of a cool location looking up at the bridge. And we've shot there before for Volkswagen. That's a location where you have to get permits, and it's a nightmare to try and get permission to be in there, partly for security because you're so close to the bridge and they don't like people up that close to the bridge. So, but this location, simple, easy, and again, it's as much about the location and the view behind as it is about the car itself. Toyota Tacoma. We're doing the shot again, trying to show the car in a location that so people can talk about. Oh, we were up in Portland. This is Mount Hood out in the background, and an action picture of the Tacoma driving through a big quarry up in the mountains there. So again, it's half the time it's about the background, half the time it's about the car. And sometimes this was a Lexus shoot we did, IS shoot in Austin, Texas. This was almost a 3-week event that we were doing. It was, most Lexus events are they're international events, so it's not just US journalists, but it's journalists from all around the world come as well. So we were dealing with Japanese, Chinese, Norwegians. It was everybody. This thing went on forever. So after a while, you kind of get stir crazy, stuck in the hotel doing all this stuff. And one day I decided, you know what? I had this picture. This picture was shot late in the day, late in the afternoon. It's a sunset shot, basically. And you can see the buildings kind of above and behind the car. They were shining bright orange sunset reflections and everything. So I was in the hotel room going stir crazy. I said, I'll just screw around and do something. So I threw in a bunch of blue to make it look like nighttime. All the reflections in the windows, I just painted in blue to make it look nighttimey. Threw in a fake moon above the hill and a fake moon flare. The only thing lighting here is there was a bit of a strobe in this front right corner of the car. And the client loved this image. Actually, the Japanese design of the car loved this image, but this was just me being bored silly, being stuck in a hotel room and going crazy. Normally probably wouldn't do all that kind of stuff, but it was fun, and we've done stuff like that since, and usually the client likes the crazy, wacky things that we end up doing. So next one was, again, going back to Hawaii and the Lexus LC500. We've done a sunrise. Yeah, absolutely. Well, wish I could own one. But anyway, we did a sunrise picture. We had this shot we were going to do. We did just about half a mile away from here, and then we planned to come back to a location very close to this, and we knew where we were going to go, and this hill was going to give us the shade from the sun. And when we got to the location, there was a gate that had been closed and locked, and we couldn't get in. So we were frantic, rushing around, and we went around the corner and found this road. But by the time we got in location, the sun had already popped over the hill. And it just didn't look right, especially because it was a black car. The flare was just killing us, and it just didn't look right. So I frantically tried to think, what can I do? We lost it, and then this happened. I just went, oh, I put my hand in there, killed the flare, and the car looked good all of a sudden. Even the little flare on the back corner of the car kind of looked interesting. So I did that frame. We got that frame. We did that frame, and then we just stacked them all together and ended up with that frame, which
Oh
is
my gosh.
with a cool flare, but the car looking kind of good. And again, this is another example of cars don't look good in bright sunlight. You look at that, and it just looks horrible. But when you get the right light on the car, it really works kind of well. So that was again one that got a lot of coverage, and it's always interesting after the fact. From an event like this, we probably provide anywhere from 75 to 200 images, ready to go to give to the journalists. And it's always interesting to kind of look which images people pick and use in the magazines or online, whatever. This was one again that got a lot of coverage, and it's just kind of cool when you've spent the time to see that people kind of appreciate it and like it. Everybody has a drone these days, and this was a Hyundai. The client actually suggested this image um, because of the wing. This was a race car, um, and he wanted to see the wing with Hyundai on it and everything. And so it was his suggestion. We don't do a huge amount of drone photography, but sometimes it's just important, and it works out quite well. Again, Hyundai and the Elantra. This was a kind of cool sunrise on the car that it was interesting, at least on the side of the car. But the sky in the background was just totally boring. It was just grey and weird. It was a strange sunrise. So we ended up just throwing in this dramatic sky, and again the client just went crazy over the shot and actually wanted us to do some other fake skies and some stuff just to make it look different and emotional was the word he used at the time. So here we go. This was one we just did a couple of weeks ago out at the Hyundai's proving ground, and this is all available. This is the sunrise, which we were kind of lucky with. The natural sky was kind of cool, but there was, because of this cloud low down and a lot of cloud up above, there wasn't a lot of reflective light in the side of the car. So again, this is an open strobe. This is probably 6 or 8 frames of different exposures stacked together. This car there has this kind of chevron shape in the middle of it that they're really keen on showing off. And it doesn't show up very well naturally in a lot of shots. So we end up kind of lighting it to try and exaggerate those shapes. This was, one of those examples of just stacking exposures and doing stuff.
Actually, David, could you go back 2 shots? Well, right before this one. That one. Somebody asked in the chat, how is this lit?
This is totally daylight. This is God doing everything here except for the top of the frame, which is Photoshop, just a fake sky in Photoshop. But
okay,
yeah, everything below the orange glow is totally available light. This was, and again, out in the middle of the desert, we do a lot of stuff. Both these cars at the time were very secret cars, and this was at their proving grounds, which is out near Mojave Airport, in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, to give you an idea of how crazy some of these things are for secrecy, code red, and whatever. A long time ago, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I used to do a lot of stuff for Honda and Acura, and we go to Japan and shoot at their test track in Tochigi, north of Tokyo, and they have a big giant oval, you know, like 6 mile oval and winding road courses and everything. And there'd be cars driving around, you know, 50 cars at any given time. Would be driving around doing various testing things, and we'd be there shooting pictures of some part of the property. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this siren would go off, and there'd be just loud horns going off and people going crazy. And what it was, they have a radar system. And if ever a plane, a helicopter, anything approaches the facility, the radar system signals and the sirens go off. And every car in the facility has to dive into covered Nissan huts that are at the side of the track so that nobody can photograph them because they're all secret prototype cars. That's how crazy it is. So at any given time, there could be 50 cars diving into these huts to keep out of the way. So secrecy for some of these companies is just absolutely crazy. Um, Again, this is actually a fairly old image, but Range Rover. This is up on Azusa Canyon in Los Angeles here. Um, this is almost totally natural. I don't think there's anything too fake going on in here. This is just how it was. I think I added a bit of flair, added some flair to the sun, but basically it's kind of the way it was. This one was, there's quite a bit of Photoshop going on in here. Um, the flaring, the foggy flaring thing, it was kind of slightly foggy, but we kind of enhanced it. This is up in Cambria, and added the sun flare in the building up in the top left corner behind there. So again, some Photoshop, but this again is, other than the bit of fog and the flare in the window, the car light is all totally natural. Toyota Prius. This is up in Ojai, and we've been shooting all day long, and we came back, and we'd actually kind of given up on the day, and the lights in the background, the building in the background is the restaurant of the hotel, the Ojai Valley Lodge. And we were walking over to go and grab some food, and then these lights just turned on a timer, and they were just there hanging from the trees. We hadn't seen them before because we'd always been somewhere else shooting. So these lights came on, and we went, "Holy crap! We've got to use this." So one of the guys rushed back and grabbed the car, and we just rolled it straight into location and fired off a bunch of strobes. The strobe under the light, orange light under the car is a strobe, just to try and give it a look at the sun coming through. But the car was completely black. Everything you see there is strobe added out of it. I can't even think how many frames and exposures that was, but there's a lot of photo stacking in that thing. Kind of crazy, but it turned out to be really cool. But again, it was one of those just happened out of the blue. Okay, last couple here on this little batch here, but this is the Sonata, Hyundai Sonata, and the client wanted to shoot the roof of the car, which is an all glass roof, and this is behind their main building in Fountain Valley. It's just, there's a little patch of perfect asphalt that's behind the building, and we went up on the parking structure on the side and just fired off this, and all the light on the front of the car, everything on the front of the car is a single strobe, just a single open face strobe. Everything on the back is daylight, and the side of the car is kind of the sunset. But again, trying to enhance, they wanted to show how all the lines in the hood were creases and everything, cast all the shadows. And so again, it's this was never planned. It was just one of those things that kind of happened, but it just kind of it turned out really well. Again, the client really liked this image. And then the last in this group, and we'll go on to some other things now, but not everything we do is in a perfect location. This was shooting, the car on the left is the Toyota Mirai. This is the prototype of the Mirai hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. And they were doing cold weather testing up in, no, it wasn't Alaska, it was Canada. It was up in Yellowknife, northern Canada. And they were doing cold weather testing in the freezing weather to see just how all the batteries and everything worked in the cold weather. So this is actually a frozen lake with a road running through the middle of it. It was about almost 40 degrees below zero when we were up here doing the shoot. So not only do you have to deal with, you know, all the other elements, like the car, you can, as you can see, is camouflage. It's got kind of plastic camo over it. So we weren't trying to get beauty shots of the car so much, but just atmospheric shots showing what was going on. But when it's that cold, the batteries in your camera last about 5 minutes and then they're dead. And if you use external batteries, the cable that goes from your camera to your battery gets so brittle it will literally break in your hand. So we do some of these things where the photography is pretty simple and straightforward, but just surviving is sometimes a little tough. And we've done a bunch of the stuff in the frozen north. We were in the chase vehicle, the silver vehicle behind there. But we probably drove about 500 miles through all this stuff over a course of 2 or 3 days, shooting video and still images at the same time. So this was 4 guys, a 4-guy crew, and three people from the client were up there too. So it was this was a fun one, but again, it's the photography was easy. The staying alive was the hard part. This was another one. We were doing this outside Phoenix. We'd been shooting this RAV4, and we'd finished. We'd shot. We'd done everything, and you can see the sky was dark. It was, you know, it was gone, and we were just about to leave. And one of my guys was in one of the other cars, a chase vehicle, and he jumped in the car, turned the car on, and kind of started to roll around the corner, and the lights hit the side of the car. And I went, whoa, 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 hang on a second. So we backed it up. And this is headlights on high beam, and then another vehicle off to the right with its headlights for the nose of the car. Just pure chance. We just kind of came across it almost by accident, but and it ended up being an interesting image. And we did a whole series of kind of really moody images like this on this car, which the client kind of liked. This was Mazda, a CX-5, and Mazda's a strange company in that they let their design department actually dictate a lot of photography, which is really unusual. Normally the PR people or whoever it is will say what they want, but here the design people wanted to have their say, and they all, in a pre-shoot meeting, they just kept on going on about one light streaming through trees, one light flares, and, you know, whatever. So we got to the location on the first day, and we'd done a bunch of other stuff, and then this just kind of happened. We never planned it. We turned around and it's like, whoa, look at that. So we ended up shooting this, and this one got a lot of play when they introduced this car. But again, you're dealing with a client, what they want rather than what you want to shoot. And in this case, the design people, if you look at Mazda advertising and PR, it's always very dark and moody. The car's often half out of focus and there are trees over the top of it. And they do a very different look to their advertising and their photography than just about any other company. And it's sometimes interesting to try and deal with that and fulfill their wishes. And this was an example of pretty well doing it, but almost by accident. Lexus again.
That's pretty.
Yeah, this is a straight picture, but the original frame, all this background area, everything behind the car was a lot lighter. The sun was rising. I believe the sun was almost directly behind the car. The flare that you see in here is artificial. There's a bit of a flare in the top and some bokeh going down across to the right. And I didn't like the image. The original image just didn't excite me much. So what I did, I just darkened everything up a huge amount, lightened up the wheels a little bit, and then threw in a bit of the flare. I actually had to create the shadow. The shadow that you see in the foreground here is not reality. But I kind of figured out where my sun was going to be, and then figured out where the shadow looked kind of believable. But this was making me happy rather than the client happy. I think the client kind of liked it, but sometimes you just shoot stuff and it just doesn't quite do it for you. So this is Photoshop here. This one, on the other hand, it looks weird. This is daylight. This is late sunset up in the mountains, Tejon Ranch up off Interstate 5. We use this location a lot, again, for secrecy. It costs almost $4,000 a day to rent the location, but you've got all these cool roads up in the mountain and it's totally secure, all locked off and nobody can get in there. And this is a part of a twisty road. The black background is actually a hillside that's totally in shadow. And the sun was just creeping around the edge of the hill, hit the side of the tree in the background, hit the side of the car, and then we just threw some strobe in the front of the car. But this is pretty much straight as it looked through the camera with the addition of strobe. So this was one that just looked like something off a lunar landscape. But
I have a question for you on something you just said. So this is late sunset sun.
Yeah.
Which means it's golden hour. It's super warm. You're firing a flash that's 5,500 whatever.
Yep.
Are you doing something to match your flash, or
we're not doing anything at the location in Photoshop? Yes.
Okay.
Because that'll be this whole front section would be a separate frame, a separate exposure in Photoshop. So we'd stack that and match color balance in the frame. In this case, it was a white car, and it looked kind of funky because it was kind of orangey looking with a sunset, but it looked cool when we just desaturated it and just kept it white, and it just added to that kind of weird effect that there is going on there. So we took out the sunset glow, but left the gold, but left the glow.
Got you.
So behind the scenes, people always ask, what does it take to shoot? What do you use to shoot car photography? And I have a story. I went to college way back in the early 70s. Yeah, that was a long time ago, I know. And then it was 8 by 10 film, sheet film, big old cameras, shine flood rotation, all that crap, all this fancy stuff. And the day we started in the college, we went into this room, and this fat old guy that was teaching the class, he'd worked for Kodak, and he he brought out these giant prints, beautiful glossy prints, and it was a picture of the inside of a cathedral. There was a picture of an old Cadillac with some Marlboro cigarette thing going on, and there was some just amazing images. So he said, okay, I want you all to discuss how you think all these images were shot. So, being young kids and crazy, we all sat around and everybody was going, well, clearly this was shot on 8 by 10 and it was shot with shine flood rotation and we had this and that. Everybody was going crazy about how it was shot. And as we were talking, he bent down under the bench and pulled out a Kodak box Brownie camera. Every single one of these images was shot with an old box Brownie camera. No mechanical or anything. It was just press the button and it happened. And he turned to us all and said, this was what we shot all of these pictures on. And from now on, I don't want you to ever think about the camera being the important part of the picture. It's what you see and what goes on in your head, not the equipment. That had that had a profound effect, but things changed too since then. But sorry, Godsey, you were going to ask something?
No, I was going to say, somebody asked a question. Dwayne asked a question that, as I'm looking at your gear here, and all the shots we just went through, is a great question. How many times have your clients, looked at you and said, really, this is the location, specifically when it's not Hawaii?
You mean they question?
Like, do your clients show up at, on the side of this weird road in the middle of nowhere and go, this is it? Not being able to see how that's going to come out photographically?
Well, there are two things to that. One is, yes, they have done that. And some of them have even said that after we handed over the final image too. But we've been lucky. I've been doing this for so damn long now, that a lot of the clients, like Toyota and Lexus, one of the reasons they hired me so much was because they were so confident I could get the image they wanted. They never even came to the location. They just said, basically,
really?
Yeah, they just say, here's the car, go and shoot it, which was a godsend because, to be honest, we've had some strange situations when the client was on location. We did, in fact, there was a location. We did a long time ago. I was with a friend of mine, Dave Hawkins, who used to shoot all of Honda's motorcycle photography back in the day, and he was shooting, and for some reason I was along just hanging out, and they had a young, some 17-year-old art director came along to make the whole thing happen. And he shot the picture of this this bike going around the corner. So the bike's leaning into the corner, going around this left-hand turn. And Dave did it like 20 times until he was happy. And then the art director turned to him and said, so can we do that same thing, but have the bike lean the other way through the corner? Clearly understood nothing about, the physics of motorcycles. He wanted it to lean the wrong way, go around the corner. And we've had situations like that where clients just don't understand the car, don't understand photography or whatever. It becomes a weird situation where you're kind of trying to be nice and polite, but they're kind of they're out of it. They don't know. So it was good for a lot of these shoots that we just got trusted with the keys basically and told, go and do it. So this is actually a pretty old picture, a fairly old picture, because it's Canon cameras in here. I shoot everything on Sony's these days, but it gives you some idea of or some, this is not all of it by a long way, but it gives you some idea of the stuff. Cleaning, a lot of cleaning equipment up in the top left. This black pole across the top here is a camera mount, mainly for doing video, but we use it for stills. This is a sprung, a suspended mount hanging off in front with the camera. The camera hangs from that with a gyro mount below it. So we can do car to car photography. We do a lot of action at speed where we go around corners and stuff. So the camera's mounted, this whole pole up in the top center of the frame is mounted to the front or the rear of the car. This is something I built, by the way. I play an engineer on TV sometimes, and we built this thing so the camera hangs from that. We got an FS7 video camera down below, which we use a lot. We actually end up using A7 S3s these days for a lot of the video we shoot. They just do an amazing job. Got the gyro in the middle. We got the slider, an electric slider, hi-hats, suction cups. We do a lot of stuff where we mount cameras to cars. So suction cups, those metal poles behind the suction cups are to get the camera somewhere out, off and away from the car, so we look back at wheels or whatever it is we're trying to shoot pictures on. The aluminum, square aluminum tubing to the left of the frame, we have a 12 by 12 scrim that we can throw up for, especially for doing interior pictures when we're in the middle of the desert. So we want to try and get some nice daylight inside the car. The speed rail to the left, the aluminum speed rail to the left there, again, is for mounting cameras or making reflectors. There's a lot of mechanical stuff goes on in making car photography, basically. You've always got to rig things up so that cameras can go with cars or somehow move along with them. So we do a lot of that stuff, a lot of tripods, a lot of sticks and everything else. The strobes, those are just Godox 360 watt strobes that we use. Those things have proven really, really reliable and powerful enough for 99% of what we do. Yeah, that's about it, really. A drone. We don't use drones very much. So,
can you
sorry.
You just showed a shot like this, but with a car. Where's that one? Is that the next one or the previous one? Yeah, you just had it right there. Nope, other way.
Yeah,
right there.
One. Yes. So this is studio photography. This is in probably one of the busiest car studios, photography studios in the country, maybe in the world, or it used to be. It used to be called South Bay Studios. It's in Long Beach. They have, I think, 16 different stages. Some of them are probably 100 feet by 75 feet, pretty big. This one is, I think, maybe 40 feet wide by 100 feet deep. So this is a cyc. This room has a 2-wall cyc. Most of them have 3-wall. There's no return. There's no top return on the cyc in these things, because when you're shooting cars, you want to shape the daylight, and if you have a return roof on the cove, it's really hard to sometimes get the light shaped the way you want it to do. So they deliberately don't put a top on these things, which some studios have. And here there are 2 options for lighting. Here we're using all hot lights. This is I'm trying to think how many lights there are. Actually, not many lights going on here at the time, but we're bouncing everything off flying flats. The flying flats, I think, are 30 feet by 12 feet. And they're suspended by a single cable in the middle. So we can rotate them, tilt them, make them go any which way we want to do it. And then we have a fixed one on the, well, not fixed, but a vertical one on the side as a reflector. And then we're just bouncing light off the cyc or off the flying flat. And you can see how we're just streaking across edges of the thing to give just a highlight edge to the car. There's stuff going on. You can't see the lights themselves, but you can see there is light on the rear wall, which is also just giving a slight kick to some edge of the car or just highlighting a curve. I don't know how many lights. There are probably 10, in this case, 10 lights. Is by some standards, this is not a huge shot. But the other thing too is going back to my first slide, which is they're all just a giant chrome ball. The hard part here is making sure that the lights themselves don't reflect in the car. So every light is hidden behind a flag. There are flags, you know, in the middle here. There's one, the light is going up on the roof. There's a flag down below it. There are flags everywhere stopping the direct reflection of the light itself. That's the really hard part. Part of the reason we're doing it with hot lights is this was also a video shoot. So we're doing a shoot, a dual shoot basically. I actually enjoy using hot lights. The alternative that they have here is they have a Fisher. There's a company called Fisher that makes this giant softbox that's the same size as that flying flat. It has, I don't know how many strobes in it. It probably has 70 strobes heads in it, lighting it, and you can turn them off individually and light up areas and not light up areas. The problem is you can't just do streaks of things like we're doing here. And so I prefer doing it with reflective light like this because you can make more shape to things and make it more interesting. The other thing we normally do too is, and it's not happening in this situation, is we actually build a black wall. So the side of the car in this case looks pretty flat and deep in just gray. So what we'll often do is build a wall down the side with black duvetine material, just black non-reflective fabric, and actually build this wall all the way down the side of the car, about 8-10 feet away from the car, and then light the wall behind the white wall behind this black wall we've created. So you get this, the bottom half of the car is kind of dark, and you get this almost sunrise, sunset look where the highlight runs down the side of the car. Again, that adds another 5 lights to the setup. So it's not unusual to be using maybe, 20 lights at some time if you're going crazy. So that's relatively typical in studio shot.
Wow.
This is a not typical shoot. This was for Cycle World magazine. We went to Jerez, Spain, and it was a test. It was a test day for the MotoGP teams before pre-season, and they'd worked out a deal to shoot a bunch of photography of the Wayne Rainey's World Championship winning bike. So they wanted to do this thing, and we just set up this studio, if you want to call it that, in the garage behind the pit area. So it's just a single strobe head with a Chimera light box. and then two strobes that we rented locally, bounced off some white sheets, because we flew here and didn't really know what was going to be happening when we got there. So we took some equipment, but we rented a little bit locally, and this is how we did it basically. Um, and here's the guy that wrote the story with me back in the day. Um, I even have a light meter around my neck, I think, so it gives you some idea. We don't use those very much anymore these days, but yeah, this is kind of doing it the hard way out on location. Sometimes it's not quite as easy as working just in a regular studio. And this is going back to you'll recognize this rig, Steve, because this is a
Oh,
motion
yes.
a motion rig that we use. Now you'll see in a minute. I'll show you some motion rig shots that we use for this. This is a carbon fiber pole. It's actually 24 feet long. It's in sections, and it's supported on the car with 3 or 4 suction cups, and the camera is on this end of the pole, and obviously the pole and the car move together at low speed, very low speed, but we use an extremely long, multi-second exposure depending on what we're trying to do. So it looks like the car's doing 100 miles an hour because the background's all streaky during the long exposure, but the car stays sharp and in theory stays nice and sharp. The wheels spin. We usually do a stationary frame just to make sure we got at least the front of the car sharp, and we can always drop that individual frame into the image if it's shaky while the car's moving. But so this is something that we made. This is the whole thing I've made up. Then there's a lot of Photoshop involved in removing all the equipment out of the shot. This is a typical crew shot too for a PR thing that we used to do. Me on the left, my son Simon, who's inside the car with the glasses on. He's also a shooter, videographer as well. But he helps me a lot with the stuff. And then Dave Newman, the lighting guy, and on the left, and he's the audio guy. And then Scott Sessma on the right-hand side, he's the videographer. And Scott, I've known since he was in high school. I hired him when he was in high school, and he had no idea what he was doing and no interest in photography. And now he's a really successful videographer on his own, in his own right, doing a lot of this stuff too. So that's a typical crew. This was me on in Belize, on the top of a pyramid in Belize. Typical here with all the cameras around my waist in a pouch. It was the hottest, most humid day I've ever experienced right there. Again, that was quite a few years ago, shooting for Acura out in the jungle. Literally, we were out in the middle of nowhere shooting all this stuff for Acura one time. Coming back to Hawaii, this is a camera rig set up for doing the video. While they're shooting the video, I'm shooting the still images. And video takes longer, so usually end up with twice as much still imagery as videography. But we work together. But it's always harder trying to do the same kind of thing in both still and video. It takes often different kind of situations, locations, trying to find somewhere where you can pan the camera in video where you don't need to bother about what's in front or behind or above the car or whatever. So trying to do video and stills can be kind of a weird compromise, but we get it done. It's kind of fun. We enjoy doing it. Gives us something extra to think about. So this next one is going back to Steve mentioned this. This was actually a long time ago. This is an old SC 400 Lexus, but I actually built this geodesic rig structure here with my friend Barry, who's in the middle here in the black. Um, so this rig is pretty lightweight, thin aluminum tubing, and then we built a structure that bolted underneath the car, and then the the frame, the geodesic arm bolts up to the frame underneath. There's a second guy wire runs from the end of the camera to the back of the car to kind of give it a little bit of rigidity, and the sandbag is to kind of damp out some of the vibration. That's an old Mamiya RB67 out on the end there. So I can tell you tells you how old this is. But this is, you'll see this actual shot here coming up in a minute, but the car moves forward at maybe 3 miles an hour. In some instances, we actually push the car because the vibration of the engine is enough to kind of screw up the camera view. So we have actually pushed the car from behind before now. But car moves very slowly. Shutter speed can be anywhere from half a second to 10 seconds, depending on how blurry and crazy you want it to look. And it's just a way of making the car look crazy fast and super cool at the same time. So the other way we do a lot of motion photography is they call it a tracking vehicle or just car to car, just shooting out of the back of whatever it is. This was doing a Yamaha thing down in Florida. I have a mechanical gyro hanging underneath the camera to help stabilize. Lets me go down maybe 2 or 3 shutter speeds to over just hand holding without it. Typically something like this, depending on what you're trying to do, can be anywhere from a 60th of a second down to maybe a 15th or an 8th of a second shutter speed to get blurry background. It gets pretty hard to do it at the lower shutter speeds, and you fire off a lot of frames and get a lot of bad results in the middle, but usually there's one or two, and that's all you need. So that's how we do a lot of the motion stuff. We also do this with a rig. I have a Suburban with a rig, and you saw the pole earlier on with the camera mount that we actually mount in the back, and then I fly the camera from inside through a remote monitor. That's sometimes easier, but it's just so slow. It takes so much time. It's sometimes just easier to do it this way, and sometimes just as successful to do it this way too. And then this is my son Simon. This is the magic pole. This is the magic lighting setup. Just a single Godox 360 watt head on the end of a fiberglass pole, remote triggered from the camera, and I can adjust exposure and everything as we go along. And in a couple of frames, a couple of pictures further on here, you'll see this actually being used and give you an idea of the kind of thing that we do here, the kind of results we can get with this simple single light. So last of, I think, of the behind the scenes things is I do a lot of motorcycles are my thing. I've raced motorcycles, motocross bikes all my life. So we do a lot of stuff. This was Ricky Johnson on the right. He's a former motocross champion and a friend of mine on the left. And we were doing a story about Ricky for Racer X magazine. And the idea was to ride out in the middle of nowhere and do the story and interview him, but shoot pictures of him out in the middle of nowhere, out near Big Bear. So here, this is me riding a bike like the blue one on the right. I'm riding the bike with two cameras, some flashes, just very basic setup, but just everything in a backpack riding along. Unfortunately, on the shoot prior to this, doing the exact same thing, it was a very dusty day, and I came around a corner and hit a rock. Bike went out from underneath it very quickly, and I went down hard and broke 3 ribs. So
Oh,
sometimes it doesn't quite go the way you'd like it to go, but it's always fun to kind of get out in the middle of nowhere and do some of this, do some of these things that are a little more challenging. So cars in Photoshop, they're as I said, Photoshop has become just so central to car photography these days, more so than just about anything else I'm aware of. It's, I mean, car photography would not exist today without huge amounts of Photoshop. Um, so this is one shot I did for Hyundai. It's a shot from Elysian Park looking down over downtown. Um, but these two were never anywhere close to each other in real life. In fact, this was the shot of the car. This is straight out of the camera out in the proving grounds in near Mojave. We shot this picture, and the client kind of liked the angle on the car and everything, but they wanted something more, more interesting. We couldn't shoot this anywhere else because it was top secret at the time. Didn't want anybody to see it. So this was a frame that I'd shot of downtown at Elysian Park on another shoot we did, I don't know, maybe 2 years earlier, sunset. And then there's a fog layer thrown in on top of that. There's a bit of a flare from the right side coming in. The entire road surface is fake. Just made that in Photoshop. The shadows fake. Everything's fake here. But this is the kind of thing, and this is not maybe the best example of it. I'm not a super expert in Photoshop. I can do it, but there are guys that can do pretty amazing things. The other thing too is, and we were just talking about this today, in car photography these days, a huge amount of it, I would guess way over 50% of what you see these days, is not actually photography. It's CGI. It's digital images of the car just dropped into sometimes a digital image of the background, but there's a huge amount of non-photography when it comes to cars. Again, partly because the cars either aren't available in time or are so difficult to get to a location. This particular location, Elysian Park, is so popular that to try and get a permit to shoot here, it's a helipad in the park, but sometimes it can take, you can wait 6 months to try and get a location like this because it's so busy. I did a thing for Hyundai just the other day with a couple of SUVs, and they wanted LA in the background, and they called me 3 days before they wanted to shoot it and said, "Can we do something like this?" And I went, "No, we can't do that. It's impossible." So we ended up doing it like this and doing it in Photoshop. But ironically, the day before the shoot, I went to check the location and just try and reshoot a different view of it from downtown. And there were 2 film crews at the same location at the same time the day I went to kind of check it out. So location photography with cars is really, that's the hard part, getting into the location. This is another example of where it's kind of crazy. This is a Toyota hydrogen fuel cell trucks, the first 2 prototypes. This is in the parking lot in the front of their engineering division down in Gardena. This was the The one on the left didn't run at all. The one on the right did work, but it was broken at the time, and they couldn't. Everything had to be towed with a big tow truck. So this was as far as we could go. They couldn't put it anywhere else, but they didn't want poles and palm trees. So we ended up slicing out the background and putting in this stuff. Um, Looking at it now, I wish I'd done it a different sky. And they wanted a light. They wanted it all to say clean, bright, non-polluting and everything else. So that's partly why we chose this sky. Not my favorite, but we've done a lot of these. And in fact, I'm going to do another one of these in that same parking lot in another week's time. So again, Photoshop, Photoshop, Photoshop. This one, again, this is downtown LA in the background. The background split where it wasn't needed. The right-hand part of the background should be butted up against the left side of the background. The car was actually shot on a road outside somewhere in Kentucky, I think. It was in the middle of a green surrounding road in Kentucky for a car launch. Again, just fake sky, fake background, fake car. The car is almost entirely daylight. There's nothing very fake about the car photography, but the combination was pretty serious. This was up in Seattle. No, Vancouver, not Seattle, Vancouver. We did an event up there with Alexis. This was shot. This is actually in location, and we shot the car, and then the client didn't like the color of the car that was in the location. So we ended up reshooting the car and then dropping it in the white car in the location. Almost the exact same location. The only thing was basically we changed the car color, but again, a lot of Photoshop and reshooting. This was a personal project. This was Diamond Ranch High School off the 60 freeway, where my kids went to school. And I had this action picture. It's actually my son driving the car, and this was shot on a racetrack out in the desert. And I was just messing, trying to combine images. I just wanted to mess and see what I could come up with. So this was just for me. The client never saw this, never used it, but this was just again an experiment of putting blurring backgrounds and faking shadows. All the shadows are fake. The lighting, all the lighting is fake. The road doesn't exist, and just the car dropped onto a road that I created.
Why didn't you show it to him?
Well, for lots of reasons. This was done long after the car was shot, long after the car was introduced. This was just me goofing around, just playing about. They didn't like to show the car in really aggressive kind of situations, and they would have considered this kind of too aggressive and wasn't appropriate. So, again, this was not for the client. This was to please me. This one was for the client. This is again is Seattle. The car was shot on a road in Murrieta, out here in the Inland Empire, and then thrown into this background. This was a static shot of the car. The wheels were spun in Photoshop. Always look if you see cars like this and you ever think it might be Photoshop, check out the brake rotors in a shot like this, because brake rotors don't spin with the wheels. And I've seen more than once pictures where they've done a Photoshop job of spinning the wheels and the brake rotors the brake calipers spinning
Right.
with the wheels. And and it's pretty hard to actually do this and make it look convincing, but it's always good to see when it's done right and looks right. So that's actually a picture of my son from another car shoot we did, and he wasn't in the car. So the car was actually stationary in the original shot, but we threw this thing together. Um, just the client ended up using it and quite liked it. But anyway, so here's this is um, this is a thing we did for Lexus, and I can't remember why, but they just wanted this kind of grungy, weird look, which is not what Lexus usually did. They requested this, and we found this location in downtown near Chinatown in LA. And they wanted this. This was kind of how it was. This is not quite the final image. The final image was a little different to this, but it gives you some idea of what went into doing this. This was also we. This was one of the few times that we didn't shoot video at the same time as still, and it was good because, as you'll see in the next couple of frames, this is basically how we shot this. This is the geodesic frame. I built this frame. It's 18 by 10, I think, is the size. 18 by 8, just with some material over it. We're throwing in, I think we used hot lights for this. And I can't, yeah, we used hot lights for this, and I can't remember why we didn't strobe it. But anyway, we did. So we're just shooting. You can see there's a light stand just in front of the car. There's a light high up on the light stand shooting down to light the roof and to exaggerate this panel below the windows on the side of the car. So then there was another frame with the same panel lighting from the rear, just to kind of light across the back of the car. And then this shot was entirely to shoot that kind of exaggerated diamond at the bottom of the doors. That's all this one frame did. And then here's another frame just reflecting a gray side to the car. And we did some other stuff too, which didn't end up in the shot that actually the final shot, but this was just some of the frames. I'm guessing there were probably 10 different exposures stacked together here. And then if we go back to the original, to the final, the light streaks, were added after the fact. We did some smoke in the room, but there wasn't enough daylight to really work to make it happen and look cool. So that's the street lights are just Photoshop too. But again, lots of layers, lots of stacking, and just trying to visualize all the different elements of the car that you're trying to exaggerate and enhance, whatever. So this one, this was just a week and a half ago we shot this thing. This again is sorry, here it is. This was just a week and a half ago. Hyundai Elantra N-Line, so the sport version of this car. And again, I mentioned earlier, there's this chevron thing going on in the side of the doors. They really want to show this. It's big time important to them. So we did this at sunrise, but it wasn't a really great sunrise at the time. So we came in and used the pole. So here we get 1 frame, 2 frames, 3 frames, 4 frames. Keep moving down the car, just keep shooting all these frames. A frame for the back of the car, frames for wheels, frames or whatever. So put all those together, stack them all together, and throw in a bit of a sun flare in the front right corner and add a slightly different sky. And there you go. They were all really happy because they got the chevron showing up in the side of the car. But in real, just normal daylight, it didn't happen, didn't show up. So again, sometimes you've got to fake things to make the client happy and show some of the things that the designer hoped would be there all the time. Another thing we use is just a light painting with this is an LED. This actually is a cheap one I bought at Harbor Freight, an LED light stick. And light sticks can be kind of fun, but they're really hard to use because if you don't use them, if you don't move them down the car at exactly the right speed and at a constant speed, you get kind of weird streaky things happening and it just doesn't look cool. So we don't use them very often. This was kind of the result from that one shoot at San Diego. Again, not my favorite. You can only use them in really dark conditions. You can't use them as a fill. Oops, what the heck is going on? You can't use them as a fill in brighter sunshine or whatever. It's just a nighttime kind of thing, but sometimes it just kind of works. Here's again Diamond Ranch High School, which has got some cool concrete things going on. Just drop this in. Not my favorite image, but again, it's show you how you integrate light streaks in Photoshop. All the lighting here is Photoshop. Car was this is actually the frame. The car is the shot that you saw earlier, shot up in Vancouver by the harbor with the lights at night. But again, this was one thing I was just messing with, trying to figure out some stuff. After this shot, I created this one, which was for a promo that I sent out. And this was a car that I shot in Texas, in Austin, Texas, on an event. And then again, Diamond Ranch High School with a bunch of weird flares and all kinds of things going on. I actually got 2 jobs specifically from this promo that I sent out. 2 clients saw it and went, oh, I like that, let's do something similar. And this was a car, this is a building downtown LA, and we shot it with a long time ago. And this was another experiment. This was not something the client used. But we shot this building downtown LA, and there was another car in here, and I removed the car and threw in this Corolla that was actually shot on a beach in Hawaii. And then threw in the sunset wasn't there, the sun was fake and all. This is just, it was a Photoshop experiment. The ground was all fake, everything was Photoshop fake. Oops, sorry, go back. And this was one of the more painful Photoshop things, and this was Designers Gone Wild. We went to do this event in Kentucky, I think it was. And we got to the event, and the assistant chief designer was at the event. And when he saw the photography on the car, he went, oh, no. It's all wrong. And I'm going, why, what's wrong? And he went, car too high. Japanese guys, car too high. And he hated the fact that there was a huge gap between the top of the wheel and the fenders on the car. So he said, no, must change. So the woman, the American in charge of the PR at the time, said, well, we just got to lower the car. So we did, I think, 15 or 20 images. We actually, in Photoshop, cut the car out, moved everything and dropped the car down on the wheels to make it look cool. And after the fact, it took forever to do all this, but we're doing it in a hotel room with, just an iMac and nothing, no fancy equipment, but did all this stuff. And then I finally talked to the chief engineer who came a couple of days later. I said, so what happened with the car? Were the wrong springs installed? What was the wrong? And he went, oh no, the car was correct. It was just the designer didn't like the way it looked. So he had us change everything, even though it was product correct. He had us change everything, and we did all this Photoshop work that took forever. So that was a not very fun Photoshop experience. And I think this is the last Photoshop one coming up now. This was a test. I got called in to do a job for a client who was doing some work, I think for Australia. They were doing some Lexus work, but they didn't have Lexus Australia product correct cars. So they had all this stuff that was shot for US. And they said, well, can we make this into a right-hand drive car? So we said, yeah, sure. And there it is. Not quite finished. Oops, sorry, keep touching that button. Not quite finished, because you'll see, if you look in the center console here, I haven't flipped some of the writing on the AC and the radio and stuff, but the majority of it is flipped. Again, this was going to be a project of 50 images, which actually never ended up happening, unfortunately. Well, fortunately, because it was such a pain in the butt to do. But again, a lot of Photoshop, and it works. It happens a lot.
David, let me just interrupt you here really quick. How many slides do you have left? Because we've actually only got about 10 minutes left.
I'll just quickly go through a few quick ones, and then some action
Sounds
ones.
good.
And then, all right, yep. So cars in action. Lots of ways of doing action. You can kind of freeze it, but you suggest the motion through the road sweeping around. There's a little bit of wheel motion here, blurry, but whatever. This is shot with probably a 200mm lens and maybe a 250th of a second as a guess. The other extreme is doing something like that, which is probably a 15th of a second and wide angle. Just stood at the side of the road, panning. This is going the car to car, shooting out the back of a car, shooting the car in motion. Again, this is probably, my guess is the 25th of a second, maybe, yeah, probably a 20th, 25th of a second, blurring
That's
it.
beautiful.
Yeah, these are hard because the slightest little bit of motion, and the car's moving, the other car the shooting's moving, the car you're in's moving, you're kind of jiggling around trying to hold the camera. So the success rate here is very low. But if you fire enough frames, eventually you get it. So that's the way it is. So this one was, just to give you an idea, this was, we had this image and the client liked the way the car looked. And they said, can we get an action picture of it? We went, well, yeah, this was shot on a hill in Phoenix. So I dropped it in to an LA background. You've seen this background before earlier on. So then we spun the wheels, threw in a driver because there was no driver in the original frame, and threw in a bit of a sunset flare, and voila, we have a car in motion. And that got a lot of use. That image was used a lot of places. And here is the rig shot that you saw the camera earlier on the end of a pole. Here's the pole sticking out with the wire going to the car to stabilize it. Car's whizzed along at all of 3 miles an hour. And that's kind of how it ends up looking. Blurry background, looks like it's doing 100 miles an hour. And then one that Steve's familiar with, because we did this on his podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So this is this is the pole that you saw earlier. Here's the pole mounted to the car.
And I
Um,
think I literally said to you, so what are they doing here? About 40 miles an hour.
yeah, they're probably doing 2 miles an hour
He
because we're
goes,
trying to, yeah,
David says to me, no, we're running behind it.
yeah. I'm literally running with the camera, not even running, walking quickly with the camera, firing it with a remote, with a wide remote here. As the cars go around the corner. Trying to do it with 2 cars is really difficult because trying to choreograph the cars to go exactly the same speed is very hard because at this length of a shutter speed, any discrepancy in the cars are just blurred as all hell. So that was how it ended up looking once we photoshopped out the sky. And as I told Steve at the time, minutes after this, it was raining. There were probably even water spots on the car here because it was starting to rain.
Where was this?
This was Monticello racetrack up in New
Gotcha.
York. Yeah, up in New York. Same rig. We did the same rig, same shot going around the corner the opposite direction. This got used in their brochures and stuff. This was a different rig out in Vegas somewhere, trying to make it look like it was drifting. Um, this was at this was in Upland, at the airport in Upland again. This foreground, the red and white stripes are actually pieces of cardboard painted white and red, just laying down on the ground. But because it's blurred enough, it looks like the inside of a racetrack corner. That's the same rig in front of the Water Authority building in Cucamonga. Just cars going. I think we were actually pushing the car here. I can't remember why, but I think we pushed the car, so it's doing all of 2 miles an hour. Another rig from the rear. This actually got used in a brochure too. Again, you can see the pieces of cardboard on the ground looking like the inside of a racetrack. This was a center spread in their brochure for this car, that same carbon fiber rig. And then this was an action shot that we just did a couple of weeks ago behind the building at Hyundai. And we just kind of threw in some sun flare, cleaned up the road, got rid of some of the doors in the background. Again, quite a bit of Photoshop work, but it was because of this, I just got another job from Hyundai to do another thing like this. Motion of Photoshop combined. And then I think this is the last one. We'll make it the last one anyway. This was a shot we did in actually up here. It was in Palo Alto, I think, and San Jose somewhere. LA background, thrown in an LA background, buildings in the background. But then I was messing with it, going, God, this would be cool. I'd love to do something with this. So it ended up going from this to this. Again, like before, throwing in blue, putting in headlights. That's actually an Austin, Texas city background. Created some lights in the background, flares, the whole thing. Again, creating kind of something out of nothing, something very different out of something you already shot. And I'll do this as the last shot, but this is shot out the back of a car, literally hanging down. My hands are almost touching the ground here. Camera, gyro. There it is. Just motion. The sun is real. The only thing was the shadow. I had to kind of create the shadow a little bit because it didn't look right. The real shadow looked funky. So, but that's it. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for the last 50 years. Hard to imagine.
Wow. Well, let's do this. Let me unpin you. I'm going to make it so that everybody can come in and join us. So folks, you can unmute yourselves and start your video if you want to.
You mean start your engines?
Start your engines, yes. And that way we can kind of get everybody. Let me do this here. Actually, on my end, I am going to do one quick thing.
Steven's in motion.
Yeah, I just want to make. I want to make.
I'm a motorsports photojournalist. Of course, I'm in motion.
Yeah, I knew you had to be on here, Steve.
There we go. And one last thing. Hold on. I want to remove the pin from the first screen. There we go. And go back to speaker. Okay, there we go. I just want to make sure I'm recording everything right. So everybody, this is David. David, this is everybody. And again, folks, you can always change your view from speaker mode to gallery mode in the upper right corner of Zoom so that you can see everybody talking if you want. Does anybody have any questions for David?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, let's go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. This is really a wonderful book. I recognize many of the racing vehicles, having done racing photography myself for a long time. One of the questions I had is, to what extent, when you showed your kit on the ground, right, all the equipment, it gave me the sense that you must really plan well in advance the look, the staging, exactly how the car is going to be photographed before you arrive, right?
Yep.
Like, we're going to go here and we're going to need this equipment to set up this way with all the, the lighting assistance and everything, and we're going to get this shot. So can you tell us kind of how that process works, the time it takes, how you get ideas, things like that?
Yeah, I kind of get, my son accuses me of getting totally anal about planning and getting crazy with the stuff. So yeah, I do way too much thinking beforehand. And I'm also guilty of probably taking way too much equipment on almost every shoot, because as an example, we were just shooting today, and we left the location, and we got a call from the client going, the videographer who's doing this other thing just is swamped with stuff. Can you come back and shoot some video for us? And for the first time in my life, I didn't have my audio equipment with me because we weren't supposed to be shooting video. So once in my life, I didn't have it with me, and we couldn't help them. So normally I'd have everything, and what you saw on the ground there was 50% of what I would take on the average shoot. But yeah, I always have an idea before I get to the location. This is what I'm going to try and do. The shot with the strobes going off over the top of the car, I knew that a week in advance we were going to try and do that. So yeah, some of it is extreme planning in that respect, and then some of it is just like, well, here we are, what are we going to do? And it's just kind of shoot from the hip and try and do it. It's, a combination.
We got time for one more question. Anybody else have one? Does the cat have one?
No.
Steven's got his cat with him. I love it. Dwayne, did you ask a question earlier or the size of something?
Oh, I was asking about the size of the scrim that he was using.
Well, we use a bunch of different ones, but we have a 12 by 12. A 12 by is what we use a lot of the time. And then we use some smaller ones sometimes, just flexi fill things that we sometimes use. But
Yeah, I was asking specifically about the Duvetine.
Oh, well, when we're using Duvetine, I have a big roll. So it's a 4-foot high roll, and it's, so we'll build walls. We don't do Duvetine walls very much these days. That was more back in the film days, because we can kind of do that even more easily in Photoshop these days. Yeah.
Hey, can I add one comment before we go and we break, because I know we're bumping up 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you, David, for showing the in-studio photographs and the lighting setup and all the flags and everything you use, because we don't get enough of that kind of commercial real world lighting, info. I'm kind of a frustrated commercial photographer in many respects. So it was great to see the studio setups.
Yeah, well, I have a bunch more of that. If at some later date, if you ever want to see more of that stuff, I got a hard drive full of that. So, all right.
Yeah, that was fascinating to me as well. Anybody else? Joshua, did you have anything, or David?
Nope, I'm good.
David,
It
number
was
2.
really good.
In that case, I think we're good to go. To everybody, thank you so much for coming and joining us for 2 hours, because David's a hero of mine, and to hear him talk is just so special to me. So to David Dewhurst, thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
guys. Appreciate it.
David, I hope that you have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you again soon, Steve.
All right, we'll see everybody soon. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we're good to go.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Right.
Night.